Well, hello. It's the end of another week in lockdown, and as promised, I'm back with my regular weekday evening readings from my books. And tonight it's just gone 9 o'clock here in Port Stewart in Northern Ireland, and I'm continuing reading Breadboy. And this evening we're up to chapter 8 of Breadboy. And it's interesting as it's the weekend. We're going to be reading about me going away for the weekend to Greenhill YMCA in the 1970s with the Westie Disco. So you can imagine what that's going to be like. Anyway, thanks for joining me, and I hope you enjoy chapter 8 of Breadboy. And it's entitled The Hills Are Alive. We were all dead excited, so we were. We were standing in the rain at the corner of the West Circular Road on a Friday night, waiting for two minibuses to take us away from the troubles for a weekend of camping in the Mourne Mountains. Some nice people from Holland who liked windmills and peace had given the Westie Disco money to take us up the mountain and away from all the fighting. As the only pacifist teenager in West Belfast, I felt obliged to accept their generosity. Leslie had kindly granted me a Saturday off work, although he made it very clear that there was no such thing as paid annual leave for part-time teenage professionals. However, I was secretly delighted when Leslie informed me that on my Saturday away, he intended to deliver the whole bread round single-handedly. It was obvious that no satisfactory substitute bread boy of the right calibre could be found. It was good to know that I was irreplaceable. However, my big brother insisted that Leslie merely saw my forthcoming absence as an opportunity for cost-cutting. "Why's that bap, wee lad?" he declared. "Sure, your man's as tight as a duck's arse." We all huddled together at the gates of the church. Oh, can't turn the page. Around 30 teenagers, my parents, Uncle Henry and Auntie Emma. In front of us was a mountain of Man United and Rangers sports bags and a growing pile of sleeping bags. My wee brother was there too because he had now become the small and lively mascot for the Westie Disco. And we couldn't really leave him home on his own, even with his space hopper for company. We were standing at the exact same spot where a few years earlier gunmen had opened on fire on my scout troop. So I was quietly praying to myself that the minibuses would arrive soon and before we all became legitimate targets. Barely standing behind us was the aging Nissen hut, where we danced the night away every Saturday at the Westie Disco. The Reverend Lowe disapproved of us calling it this and reminded us regularly that it was in fact an activity of Ballygomartin Presbyterian Church Youth Club. I accepted he was technically correct, but it didn't sound quite so exciting and cool. This reminded me of when my music teacher called ABBA a Scandinavian vocal group. The Reverend Lowe didn't understand how important it was to be cool. Using the wrong words made you square, while using the right words made you beezer. I was relieved to notice that I wasn't the only person who had experienced difficulties packing and carrying a sleeping bag. Although my snake belt had fitted around the rolled up sleeping bag when I sat on top of it in my bedroom, every time I picked it up, most of the bag fell out on one side. I ended up walking down the street with an unfurled sleeping bag trailing behind me, carefully avoiding a poop recently deposited on the pavement by Petra, our street's favourite Labrador. The rolled up sleeping bags in the pile before us were tied up tenuously by an assortment of belts, elastic bands, bin bags, rope and cord. My parents' double sleeping bag, which they had bought specifically for the occasion for 20 weeks at 99p out of the Great Universal Club book, was most effectively contained by the last few inches of a roll of very sticky industrial duct tape my father had borrowed from the foundry. "Your father's a very clever man, you know," my mother commented when he applied his immense problem-solving skills to sleeping bag containment. In a threat to all our efforts, Titch McCracken was now smoking dangerously close to the pile. Like, the wee idiot's going to set all our sleeping bags on fire, shrieked Heather Mateer. Heather's health and safety fears were well founded. I imagined a premature 11th of July boney igniting right in front of us. Sure, he set the telephone box on fire in our street and I couldn't listen to Dial a Disc for a year, added Aaron Maxwell. He's a wee arsonist, so he is. Aye, said Sammy Reeves. He's always arson about. At least I'm not a boggin' minger, retorted Titch. You leave smelly Sammy alone, you wee ganch, intervened Heather. A short fight ensued, which resulted in both Titch and Sammy getting a final warning from Uncle Henry that they would be sent home if they caused any more trouble. I was certain that the nice people from Holland would be appalled if they ever heard about this outbreak of violence at the very start of a weekend they had sponsored to bring peace to Northern Ireland. Uncle Henry made Titch and Sammy shake hands like real men and went on to remind us all that there should be absolutely no smoking or drinking during the weekend. Titch obediently put out his cigarette on the pavement and then spat aggressively on top of the smouldering stub. But Sammy Reeves kept winking at everyone and smiling as if he knew what Santa was bringing us all for Christmas. Aye, dead on, he said. Hope we're not stuck in a tent with him tonight, Titch whispered in my ear with a hint of genuine panic in his voice. He's ratting. I tried not to join in all the smelly Sammy slagging because I once overheard my mother telling Auntie Emma that it was an awful pity that wee crater because his mother's bad with her nerves and his dad baits the two of them. However, I could not extend my sympathy for his family problems to tolerance of the idea of sharing a tent with Sammy. Before any further scuffles could develop, two yellow minibuses turned the corner and stopped right in front of us. Och, sticking out, said a very relieved Auntie Emma. Nobody burnt the buses. Without any trace of order, we crammed into the minibuses with our bulging sports bags and unravelling sleeping bags. Within 2 minutes, we were en route to Newcastle, County Down, where the mountains of Mourne sweep down to the amusement arcades and fish and chip shops. We had to stop only twice during the journey. The first time was when Lynn McQuiston with the buck teeth was scolded for shouting "Kick the Pope" out the window as we passed a Catholic school called St. Something's. The second stop was to allow my wee brother to pee and me to boke in a shuck beside a field of sympathetic-looking cows. Due to my travel sickness and my disdain for sectarian shouting, I was relieved when we finally arrived in Newcastle. I had visited this seaside resort once before on a red double-decker bus on a Sunday school excursion. I remembered consuming a particularly vinegary fish supper followed by sticky white. I recalled buying a stick of pink peppermint rock that said Newcastle up the middle, which I gave to my granny, but it caused havoc with her false teeth. I had not forgotten losing the rest of my pocket money in the Museys on a one-armed bandit whose cherries never came up. Thankfully, this time the minibuses drove past all the amusement arcades and pubs and fish and chip shops, taking us straight into Dunnard Park and up the dark mountain. The two minibuses cautiously climbed up a steep and narrow twisty lane with more potholes than the Shankill after a riot. I hadn't seen so much darkness since the men at Ballylumford Power Station switched off all the electricity during the Ulster workers' strike to keep us British. The whole minibus became abnormally quiet as we noticed the shadows of huge trees looming all around us. It was obvious that most of us were disturbed by this newfound darkness. If it was dark, then there must be someone out there who wanted to get you. The whole Westie disco breathed a sigh of relief when we eventually emerged from the tree-lined lane and arrived at a small triangular concrete building surrounded by tents and a sign on a big stone which read Green Hill YMCA. So I'll continue the story of our weekend at Greenhill YMCA after I said hello to a few people. So hello, Jim Poole. Good to have you along. Hi, Evelyn Brown. Hi, Nigel and Alan McLean. And hi, Fiona and Anne. Hello, Carol. Hello, Angela and Keith listening. The lovely Leslie from up the country is down the stairs. Hi from Jim and Mo, Jim Layton. Hello, Kenneth Glenville and Ian Parsley and Mona Trainer. Hi, Anne Kirk. Oh, it says here, Alan McLean says, Big T's daily internet radio show is weeknights at 9 p.m. Oh, it's competition. Ready to. Michael McKinley Sr., hello, and Maureen Robinson. Talk spell, says Alan McLean. That's definitely an in-joke for Downtown Radio listeners. Ian Campbell, hi, hello, Mark Burgess. Glad you're enjoying it, Michael McKinley Sr. Hello, Neil Cragan. Hope you're well over there. Hi, Maureen and Davy Coulter. Thanks for another week's entertainment from Davy and Anne. Hello, Ruth Blevins. Hope you're all doing well there. And hi to Kenneth Glanville. So, I'll continue the story of our weekend away at the YMCA. The YMCA camp was called Greenhill because it was situated on the side of a very big green hill. In church, we sang a hymn about a green hill far away outside a city wall, but I assumed that hill was in Israel. This big green hill was called Slieve Donard. It was the highest mountain in the whole of Northern Ireland, and it made our Black Mountain in Belfast look wee. Mind you, Slieve Donard was much smaller and less pointy and snowy than Mount Everest. So I doubt if Sir Edmund Thingamy had ever bothered having a go at climbing it, even for practice. As we disembarked noisily from the minibuses, two friendly men with beards, wearing proper khaki anoraks and big boots, both called Dave, stomped forward and greeted us. As the upper shankle exploded on the side of Slieve Donard and our true nature became apparent, the two Daves smiled nervously. They pronounced all their ings as they explained all the rules about no smoking and no drinking. My father casually turned around and removed a Hamlet cigar from his lips. A small gang led by Philip Ferris in his duffel coat immediately disappeared behind the building for a smoke, while the Daves coughed apprehensively and explained that we would be climbing and canoeing and learning about how to work together as a team. I was excited about the outdoor activities, but I thought we already worked together well as a team. The Daves had obviously never observed us doing the slush at the West End Disco or building a boney for the 11th night. For our first adventure, we were assigned 3 big green tents in a row, one for the boys, one for the girls, and one for the adults and my wee brother. As soon as I begged my place at the far side of the boys' tent, Sammy Reeves placed his odorous sleeping bag beside mine. Before I could even attempt to rearrange the sleeping positions, Uncle Henry and my father shooed us out of the tents and back up to the triangular building. Inside Greenhill YMCA, there was a hall with a tuck shop on a balcony, a kitchen, toilets, showers, a Coca-Cola machine, and something called a drying room full of wet khaki anoraks. Auntie Emma gave Titch a clip round the ear for sticking the pin from his Rangers badge into the coin slot in the Coke machine to try to get a free drink. Irene Maxwell began following me around and offered me a share of her spangles. Did this wee girl really think she could buy my love with a spangle? The well-booted Daves informed us we were going up and to go out straight away to climb the mountain. I was surprised at this instant introduction to mountain climbing because it was dark and raining. At least half of us were wearing platform shoes, and only a handful had brought our Peter Storm anoraks from John Fraser's, which was definitely not a shop for outdoor wear. A real German girl with no makeup called Nina offered us a proper khaki anorak and big boots to wear from the drying room, but most of us declined because they didn't look cool and we didn't want to be squandered. Within only 10 minutes of disembarking from the minibuses, we were being marched up Slieve Donard like a junior Orange Lodge on the 12th of July, except with girls and no flags. "This will tire them out," I overheard one of the Daves whisper to Uncle Henry. Everyone was unusually quiet for the first half mile, until our eyes started to get used to the darkness and we could see where we were going in this strange environment. "Oh, Mammy!" cried Lynn McQuiston with the buck teeth, at every slight noise or apparent movement in the bushes. I pretended not to be scared at all, but my big brother found it necessary to look at me closely before announcing loudly, "You're bricking it, aren't you, you big fruit?" "Leave your wee brother alone for once," chided my mother. "He's always been scared of the dark." At home, this reprimand would have been most welcome, but not here, in front of 30 other teenagers. I put up the hood of my Peter Storm and sucked on the drawstrings. My mother's response was not at all helpful. She turned to Auntie Emma and said, much too loudly, "God love him. He's a very sensitive wee boy, so he is." Desperate to save face, I instinctively picked up a stone and threw it at a tree to display my virility and manly lack of sensitivity. Unfortunately, Lynn McQuiston mistook the sound of the impact of the stone on the tree trunk for an imminent attack by a grizzly bear, and she began to cry hysterically. It was only when Uncle Henry explained to her that we didn't have bears in Northern Ireland that poor Lynn began to calm down. "But I saw it! I saw it on the Waltons!" she protested. As the atmosphere finally relaxed, Aaron Maxwell started singing "Climb Every Mountain" from that movie about a nun with the posh English accent running around the mountain singing all the time with a crowd of annoying wee kids with her. No one joined in. When we reached the clearing in the forest, one of the Daves explained that we were not going to climb to the very top of the mountain tonight. Instead, we were going to walk down a different way to call at the Chippy in town. It was brilliant. It was now so dark you could see stars in the sky. Uncle Henry pointed to one pattern of stars and said it was called the plough because it looked like a plough. I had never seen a plough before, so I wasn't convinced. I thought the stars concerned looked more like a configuration of Dalek motherships on their way to invade Earth again, unless the Doctor intervened, which I knew he would because he always did just in time. Several offers of a spangle later from Aaron Maxwell, we finally reached the Chippy for fish and pasty suppers. We devoured these together on the harbour wall to rebuild our strength for the trek back up the Green Hill to the tents. I had never seen the members of the Westie Disco look so tired. As you would expect, it was still raining, so we rushed into our tents and got into our sleeping bags as quickly as possible. I was so exhausted, I barely had time to notice the unpleasant smell in our tent. However, I did notice that Sammy Reeves wore old pyjamas with holes in the knees, covered in faded Mickey Mouses that he'd grown out of long ago. I must have fallen asleep very quickly because the next thing I knew, it was daylight and I was awake and snug in my sleeping bag and the rain was pattering on the canvas. So I'll tell you what happened next in a wee minute. But in the meantime, I want to say hello to a few other people. Hello, David Blevins. Hope you're doing well there. And Colin Hopkins. Hi, Breed Ruddy and Patrick Connor. Patrick, who played my granny and Al Mac. He's so talented. He played both in the musical adaptation of Paperboy at the Lyric Theatre for the past few years. Hope you're doing well there, Patrick, as well. So here's the continuation of the story at Greenhill YMCA. Saturday at Greenhill YMCA was simply one amazing adventure after another. It was more exciting than being on a hijacked bus or being evacuated from the top floor of Anderson and Macaulay's department store in a bomb scare. One of the highlights was Uncle Henry's canoe capsizing in Castlewellan Lake, caught on camera by my mischievous father. I acquired new skills in archery, and I imagined I was Robin Hood, stealing from the Sheriff of Nottingham in Sherwood Forest to give bags of coins to the poor. But by far the most memorable outdoor adventure was when Heather Mateer pushed Titch McCracken into the Glen River and laughed at how his wet trousers went all clingy around the region of his Jimmy Joe. In the evening, we cooked sausages and burgers outside on a big grill over a fire like American cowboys, except with rain instead of cactuses. The Daves called this mode of outdoor cooking a barbecue. We sang songs around the campfire, led by the real German girl. Nina impressed me by playing Mull of Kintyre on the guitar even better than me. I loved it here, so I did. We were happy and free and dirty and having the best time ever. No one would have known we were supposed to be wee potential petrol bombers from West Belfast. If the nice people from Holland who had paid for all this could see us now, I thought they would be dancing with delight in their clogs up and down the nearest dyke. However, the perfection was briefly interrupted on the Saturday evening by the YMCA's attempt at a disco. As devotees of our very own Westie every Saturday night, we had very high standards. In fact, you could say we were connoisseurs of disco even before John Travolta. Unfortunately, none of the Daves could compete with my father's DJ skills or choice of music. The BRA school disco may have made the Westie look crap, but the YMCA only had an ancient set of double decks and one battered speaker that didn't produce much volume. The needle kept jumping off the records if anyone danced too enthusiastically near the turntables. Worst of all, they only had about 10 records, and one of those was an LP by Simon and Garfunkel. The Daves may have been very good at climbing mountains, but they had no idea that bridge over troubled water was not ideal disco dancing material. They did have Dancing Queen, but it got so many people up on the dance floor that the wooden floor vibrated and the needle just jumped and jumped until eventually ABBA was abandoned. Then they kept putting on Nina's 12-inch version of I Feel Love by Donna Summer, which was good at first, but it just went on and on and on forever. We were united in our disappointment. One by one, we drifted out of the hall towards the tents until only the Daves remained. My father had respectfully remained outside all evening in an attempt not to intimidate the two Daves with his superior disco competence. As each person left the disco, they made passing remarks to my DJ Da. You could teach them as in there a thing or two, Eric. That there music's shite, so it is. Couldn't beat the Westie disco with a big stick. I could tell my father was very proud. He was so delighted with the appreciation. I sensed that a request for extra pocket money would not be rejected. Heather Mateer was the last person to leave the failing YMCA disco. Like, see your woman in there on that 12-inch? She still feels fucking love, complained Heather. As we weren't quite so tired on Saturday night, there was a lot more crack in the tents. In the girls' tent, Irene Maxwell produced her cassette recorder and proudly played last Sunday's Top 40 Countdown, which she had recorded from Radio 1, especially for the trip. I could hear the muffled sound of Paul Burnett counting down from number 40 to number 1, and the girls singing Bee Gees songs and laughing into the early hours of the morning. Now and again, I could make out my mother's voice imploring them to get some sleep. Once I thought I heard the word, Irene wants a snog in the Ormo mini shop, followed by guffaws of high-pitched laughter, but maybe that was just a nightmare. Meanwhile, in the boys' tent, we were no less subdued. I had accidentally spilled some of my denim aftershave over Sammy's sleeping bag, and this made the smell more tolerable. Sammy himself was in great form. I'd never seen him in such high spirits. He had brought a big bottle of orangeade with him, and he was generously sharing it with everyone. It must have been a new kind of orangeade because I noticed it wasn't as fizzy as usual and it left an odd, warm feeling at the back of your throat. Soon everyone was in brilliant form and the crack was mighty. Titch was in stitches even though his cigarettes still hadn't dried out after being thrown in the river, and my big brother was laughing his head off at proper jokes instead of just laughing at me. At one stage, I'm sure I even heard Philip Ferris chuckle into his sleeping bag. Punk rules the bollocks, BGs. Eventually, I was so relaxed, I stopped rubbing clean the top of the orangeade bottle when it was my turn for a swig after Sammy. I was so happy, I couldn't stop laughing, and I giggled so much that when I tried to get up, I just kept falling over, which made me laugh even more. I don't remember much more about that night, but just as I was drifting off to sleep, with my head spinning, Sammy whispered over to me in the darkness, "I don't want to go home, Tony." I remembered this because he sounded dead sad all of a sudden. I don't know what happened during the night, but the next morning I woke up with the worst headache ever. I concluded that the tent door must have been flapping open all night long, and the wind had got in and given me an awful creak in my neck. It must have been a faulty tent because all the other boys woke up with the same headache. In fact, we all slept in and missed breakfast. Uncle Henry was raging, and we had just enough time to get up and pack our bags before the minibuses returned to bring us back to Belfast. The following year, I was not at all surprised when I heard a pop group called The Village People on Radio Luxembourg singing a new song with the lyric, "It's fun to stay at the YMCA." The Village People were from America, so I don't think they'd ever stayed in a big green tent in Greenhill on the slopes of Slieve Donard. But their song was true because the kids from the Westie had the best fun ever the weekend we stayed at the YMCA. On the way home in the minibus, Philip Ferris would not stop slagging Sammy. "I heard smelly Sammy crying his lamps out last night in his sleeping bag," he taunted. Sammy didn't reply and just gazed out the window, looking dead sad again. I too was approaching breaking point because my brother was inexplicably calling me a wee wino. I was about to announce to the whole bus that he had cried when Mary Ingalls went blind in Little House on the Prairie, when luckily for him, and probably luckily for me too, we were stopped by the British Army. All the boys had to get out in the rain and turn around and put our hands up on the back of the minibus and get searched for guns and bombs. When we got back inside the minibus, Uncle Henry decided to cheer us up with the announcement that our next trip away from the Troubles would be to London in the summer. The English accents of the soldiers must have reminded him. This was fantastic. We were going to travel to the place where the royal family and James Bond lived. We were going to see Big Ben from News at 10 and the Tower of London where they chopped off your head in my school history book. The response was ecstatic and we sang The Streets of London the whole way home in the rain, although no one could remember all the words. Every trip away from Belfast was getting better and better. I couldn't wait to go to Butlins for Easter, and now I could look forward to an incredible journey to London this summer on the biggest Westie disco trip ever. I was becoming quite a jet setter, so I was. So there you are, that's chapter 8 of Breadboy. I hope you enjoyed that. So let's say hello to a few more people. Hello to Breeze Buckner, and Susan Craig says, "We'll have to do without you until Monday." Now, great entertainment. Glad you're enjoying it, Susan. I'll be back on Monday with the next chapter. Hello, Walter and Patrick and Sadie. Hi, Sadie Hannah. Hello, Sammy Twale and Morgan Shuttleworth, who played the aforementioned Big Brother, also in the Paperboy musical. And hello, Heather Burns. Evelyn Brown, thanks again, Tony. Have a good weekend. Also, another great chapter, says Francis McGrath. Thanks very much. I'll be back on Monday night with the next installment from Breadboy. In the meantime, have a good weekend. Stay home, stay well, and stay positive.